My name is Sadie, and I'm 32 years old. I built a successful interior design business from nothing, creating beautiful spaces for the wealthy. When I fell in love with Jake Wesley, I thought I'd found my happy ending. Then came the dinner with his parents. His mother threw wine in my face, saying, "That's to disinfect a poor girl, pay $150,000 to marry my son." The worst part? Jake laughed. So I smiled calmly and said, "I'm cancelling all business ties with your family effective immediately. If you're watching from somewhere, family interferes with your happiness, hit like and subscribe." I'll show you how I stood up for my dignity. I never imagined I'd build a thriving business before my 30th birthday. Growing up in a middle-class neighborhood in Seattle, I always had big dreams but modest expectations. My parents taught me the value of hard work and perseverance values that would later become the foundation of my success. After graduating with a degree in interior design, I faced the harsh reality most creative graduates encounter: no one wanted to hire someone without experience. I took odd jobs working as a sales associate at a furniture store during the day and waitressing at night. Every spare moment went into building my portfolio, designing spaces for friends and family for free, just to showcase my talent. When I finally took the leap to start my own company, Elite Interiors, everyone thought I was being naive. "The market is saturated, they said. "You need connections," they warned. But determination pushed me forward. I worked 16 hours a day, 7 days a week, taking any client who would give me a chance, no matter how small the project. The first year was brutal. I operated out of my tiny apartment, converted half my living room into an office, and sometimes wondered if I should just give up. There were nights I cried myself to sleep questioning my choices, especially when I had to choose between paying rent and buying materials for a project. But slowly things began to change. A small renovation I did for a local coffee shop caught the attention of the owner's friend, who happened to be a rising tech executive. He hired me to redesign his home office and was so impressed he recommended me to his colleagues. Word of mouth spread, and suddenly I had a waiting list. By year 3, I had moved into a real office space and hired my first 2 employees. By year 5, Elite Interiors had become a respected name in Seattle's design community. My aesthetic, which blended functionality with understated elegance, appealed to the new money crowd, people who wanted beautiful homes without the pretentiousness that often came with luxury design. What made me different from other designers was my authenticity. Despite working with wealthy clients, I never changed who I was. I didn't adopt a fake accent or pretend to come from money. I was just Sadie, the hardworking designer who treated the housekeeper with the same respect as the homeowner. This authenticity attracted a particular kind of clientele, including the Wesley family. Howard Wesley, the patriarch of one of Seattle's oldest real estate dynasties, hired me to redesign their vacation home in Aspen. The project was a massive success, leading to multiple commissions for their other properties. Within 2 years, the Wesley account made up nearly 30% of my company's revenue. I never met the younger Wesley son Jake during any of these projects. He was always traveling for business or unable to attend the consultations. So when I bumped into him at a charity gala for children's education, I had no idea who he was. That night, I was there representing Elite Interiors as one of the event sponsors. While admiring the ice sculpture in the center of the room, I felt someone bump into my elbow, causing my champagne to splash on my dress. "I'm so sorry," a deep voice apologized. I turned to find myself looking up at a tall man with kind eyes and an apologetic smile. "Please let me get you another drink and pay for the dry cleaning." "Don't worry about it," I laughed, dabbing at the small stain with a napkin. Hazards of standing too close to art. He introduced himself simply as Jake, no last name, and we spent the next hour talking about everything except work. He was funny, attentive, and refreshingly down to earth. When he finally asked for my number, I didn't hesitate to give it to him. Our first date was at a small Italian restaurant tucked away in a neighborhood I'd never visited. It wasn't fancy, but the food was amazing and the atmosphere intimate. Jake seemed more interested in my childhood stories than in impressing me with his own achievements. Over the next few weeks, we fell into an easy rhythm. Weekend hikes in the mountains, lazy Sunday brunches, impromptu movie nights. When I invited him to my apartment for the first time, he didn't make a single comment about its modest size or the IKEA furniture I still hadn't replaced. 6 months into our relationship, I realized I had fallen completely in love with him. When I mentioned meeting his family, he always had a reason to postpone. They travel a lot, or "my mum's redecorating the house and hates having visitors during construction." I didn't push it, assuming he had his reasons. It wasn't until we'd been dating for a year that Jake finally proposed. We were hiking our favorite trail when he stopped at the viewpoint overlooking the city, got down on one knee, and asked me to marry him. The ring was beautiful but not ostentatious, exactly what I would have chosen for myself. That night, as we celebrated with takeout and wine in my apartment, Jake finally opened up about his family. "My parents are Howard and Margaret Wesley," he said cautiously, watching my reaction. I nearly choked on my wine. "The Wesley family, as in my biggest clients, the Wesleys." He nodded, looking slightly embarrassed. "I wanted you to know me for me, not as a Wesley. Too many people in my life have been interested in my family name rather than who I am." I was stunned but touched by his reasoning. "So all this time you knew I worked for your family?" "Yes, but I never discussed you with them. I wanted to keep our relationship separate from business." As the shock wore off, a new thought occurred to me. "Your parents have no idea they've been working with their son's girlfriend for the past 2 years." Jake laughed. "None whatsoever. My mother would have a fit if she knew. She's very particular about keeping personal and professional lives separate." "Well," I said, taking a deep breath, "I guess it's time I properly met your parents, not as their designer, but as your fiancé." Jake's smile faltered for just a moment before he agreed. "Yes, I think it's time. Let's have dinner with them next week." Looking back, I should have noticed his hesitation, the brief shadow that crossed his face. But I was too happy, too in love to see the warning signs. I was excited about finally meeting the family of the man I loved, never imagining that this dinner would change everything. The day of the dinner, I spent hours getting ready. I chose a navy blue dress that was elegant but not flashy, paired with the pearl earrings my grandmother had given me for my college graduation. For a gift, I brought a hand-blown glass vase that I had commissioned from a local artist specifically for Margaret Wesley, knowing from our professional interactions that she collected art glass. Jake picked me up at 6, looking handsome in his tailored suit but uncharacteristically quiet. When I asked if everything was okay, he squeezed my hand and said, "Just a little nervous. My parents can be intense." Then he added, "No matter what happens tonight, remember that I love you." At the time, I thought it was sweet. In hindsight, it was a warning. The Wesley estate was even more impressive than I remembered from my professional visits. Set on 5 acres overlooking Lake Washington, the main house was a modernist masterpiece of glass and steel softened by strategic landscaping. A fountain featuring a bronze sculpture burbled in the circular driveway where Jake parked his car. "Ready?" he asked, helping me out of the car. I nodded, suddenly feeling butterflies in my stomach. As I'll ever be. The massive front door opened before we could ring the bell, revealing Howard Wesley. In his 60s, with silver hair and the same kind eyes as Jake, he welcomed me with unexpected warmth. "So you're the woman who's captured my son's heart," he said, taking both my hands in his. "I've seen your work, of course. The Aspen house has never looked better." I thanked him, relieved by his friendly reception. Maybe this wouldn't be so bad after all. Then Margaret Wesley appeared behind her husband. Tall and slim, with expertly coloured blonde hair and a face that spoke of multiple cosmetic procedures, she looked at least 15 years younger than her husband. She wore a cream-coloured pantsuit that probably cost more than my monthly rent and jewellery that could pay off my student loans. "You must be Sadie," she said, her voice cool as she assessed me from head to toe. There was no handshake offered, just a slight nod of acknowledgement. "It's a pleasure to meet you, Mrs. Wesley," I replied, extending the gift bag containing the vase. "I brought you something I thought you might enjoy." She took the bag with 2 fingers as if it might contaminate her. "How thoughtful," she said without looking inside. She handed it to a hovering staff member with instructions to put it somewhere. Howard led us to the dining room, a space I had actually designed 2 years earlier, with its spectacular chandelier and custom-made table that could seat 20. Tonight it was set for just the 4 of us, the table looking absurdly large for such an intimate gathering. As we took our seats, Margaret immediately began questioning me about my family background. "Your parents, what do they do?" she asked while a server poured wine. My dad was a high school English teacher and my mum was a nurse. They're both retired now, living in Arizona. "Teaching and nursing," she repeated, as if they were exotic, slightly distasteful occupations. "And where did you attend university?" "State University," I answered honestly. "On scholarship." "Oh." Margaret's eyebrows rose slightly. "I see. No family legacy to follow then." Before I could respond, Howard jumped in, asking about my business. I gratefully turned my attention to him, explaining how I'd built elite interiors from the ground up. That's quite impressive, Howard said, seeming genuinely interested. Building something from nothing takes real grit. Or desperation, Margaret added. Though interior decorating isn't really a profession, is it? More of a hobby that some people pay for. I felt my cheeks flush but kept my composure. Interior design is actually a regulated profession requiring education, certification, and extensive knowledge of building codes, materials science, and architectural principles. It's quite different from decorating. Jake remained silent beside me, occasionally squeezing my knee under the table, but never actually defending me. As the first course was served, Margaret shifted the conversation to the wedding. Jake tells me you haven't set a date yet, she said. We only got engaged last week, I explained. We're thinking maybe next spring. Spring weddings are so common, she sighed. The Wesley family traditionally marries in November at St. Mark's Cathedral. We'll need to book soon if we want to secure it for next year. I glanced at Jake, who was suddenly very interested in his soup. We hadn't discussed any of this. We were thinking of something smaller, actually, I ventured. Maybe an outdoor ceremony. Margaret laughed as if I'd told a particularly naive joke. A Wesley does not get married in a backyard, dear. We have a reputation to maintain. The dinner continued in this vein, with Margaret making plans for our wedding without consulting either of us, while Jake nodded along like a puppet. Howard occasionally tried to steer the conversation toward neutral territory, but his wife dominated every exchange. By the time dessert arrived, I was mentally exhausted from navigating this minefield, but the worst was yet to come. Now, Margaret said, folding her hands on the table, we need to discuss the financial arrangements. Financial arrangements? I echoed, confused. For the wedding and beyond, she clarified. The prenuptial agreement, of course, but also your contribution to the wedding expenses. I looked at Jake, who was staring at his plate. We haven't discussed any of this yet, I said. Well, we're discussing it now, Margaret stated firmly. The Wesley family will cover 70% of the wedding costs, as is traditional for the groom's family. You will be responsible for the remaining 30%, which, given the standard of wedding appropriate for a Wesley, will amount to approximately $150,000. I nearly choked on my water. Excuse me. In addition, she continued as if I hadn't spoken, you will need to sign a prenuptial agreement stating that you have no claim to Jake's trust fund or any family properties. Your business, however, once merged with the Wesley Corporation, will become a subsidiary and subject to board approval for all decisions. Merge my business, I repeated, feeling like I had stepped into some alternate reality. I have no intention of merging my company with anything. Margaret's eyes narrowed. Every Wesley spouse contributes to the family business. It's tradition. I've built my company from nothing. I'm not just going to hand it over because of tradition. A tense silence fell over the table. Howard cleared his throat uncomfortably. Jake still wouldn't look at me. Then Margaret did something I could never have anticipated. She picked up her wine glass, walked around the table to where I was sitting, and deliberately poured the red wine over my head. As the cold liquid ran down my face and onto my dress, she said in an eerily calm voice, "That's to disinfect a poor girl with delusions above her station. Pay $150,000 if you want to marry my son or forget about him. That's the price of admission to this family." I sat frozen in shock, wine dripping from my hair, staining the designer dress I had carefully selected. But what shattered my heart wasn't the wine or the cruel words. It was Jake's reaction. He laughed. A short, nervous laugh, but a laugh nonetheless. "Mum always has her own way of testing people," he said, offering me a napkin but not a defense. In that moment, I knew exactly what I had to do. Time seemed to slow down as I felt the wine trickle down my neck and seep into my dress. The room was silent except for the soft, dripping sound of wine hitting the hardwood floor that I had personally selected for this very dining room 2 years ago. The irony wasn't lost on me. I could see Howard's embarrassed expression, Margaret's triumphant smirk, and worst of all, Jake's uncomfortable half-smile as he continued to avoid my eyes. This was the man I had planned to spend my life with, the man who had just sat by while his mother humiliated me. In that moment, something crystallized within me. A sense of clarity cut through the shock and hurt. I had spent years building my business, my reputation, my self-worth. I had overcome countless obstacles and rejections. I wasn't about to let anyone, no matter how wealthy or powerful, reduce me to nothing. I slowly reached for a napkin and dabbed at my face, careful not to show any emotion. Then I looked directly into Margaret Wesley's cold eyes and found my voice. I appreciate your candor, Mrs. Wesley. I said, my tone even and controlled. It makes my decision very simple. I will be cancelling all business contracts with the Wesley family effective immediately. The smirk vanished from Margaret's face. What did you just say? Elite Interiors will no longer be working on any Wesley properties. I'll have my lawyer send over the termination paperwork tomorrow. Howard shifted uncomfortably. Now, Sadie, let's not be hasty. Margaret sometimes expresses herself poorly, but I held up my hand. This isn't a negotiation, Mr. Wesley. Your family currently represents 30% of my company's business. I'd rather lose that 30% than my self-respect. Finally, Jake seemed to realize the severity of the situation. Sadie, baby, you're overreacting. Mum was just joking around testing you. It's her weird way of welcoming you to the family. I turned to look at the man I thought I knew. Is that what you think this is, Jake, a joke, a test? Because from where I'm sitting drenched in wine, worth more than what my parents made in a month, it doesn't feel very funny. All families have their quirks, he argued weakly. You just need to understand our dynamics. Okay. If your family dynamic includes public humiliation and extortion, then I want no part of it. I stood up, wine-stained dress and all, and I want no part of a man who would sit by and let it happen. Margaret scoffed. Don't be dramatic, this is business. The Wesley name opens doors that would otherwise remain closed to someone like you. $150,000 is a bargain for what you're getting in return. What I'm getting, I repeated incredulously. A lifetime of being treated like I'm beneath you. The privilege of having my business decisions controlled by your board. A husband who won't stand up for me. No thank you. I removed the engagement ring from my finger, the diamond catching the light as I placed it on the table. I deserve better than this. Jake stood up, panic finally registering on his face. Sadie, wait. Let's talk about this privately. You're upset, I get it, but don't throw away everything we have. Again. I looked at him one last time, memorizing his face, knowing this would be the end. What we had, Jake, was a lie. You let me walk in here unprepared for this ambush. You knew what your mother was planning, didn't you? His silence was all the confirmation I needed. Goodbye, Jake. I truly loved you, or at least the person I thought you were. I walked out of the dining room with my head held high, ignoring Jake's calls to come back. Howard followed me to the door, his expression apologetic. Sadie, for what it's worth, I think you're making a mistake. But I also think you're showing more backbone than anyone who's ever sat at that table. My son's a fool. Thank you, Howard. Please don't take this personally, but I'll be having someone else from my office contact you about the contract terminations. The drive home was a blur of tears and anger. My phone buzzed repeatedly with calls and texts from Jake, but I ignored them all. By the time I reached my apartment, my sadness had transformed into something else resolve. I had built my business from nothing once. If necessary, I could do it again. That night, as I washed the dried wine from my hair, I made a promise to myself. I would never again compromise my dignity for anyone, no matter what it cost me. The morning after the dinner disaster, I woke up to 27 missed calls and 15 text messages from Jake. Each one more desperate than the last, ranging from "please call me" to "you're overreacting" to "we need to talk." I ignored them all and headed to my office earlier than usual, needing to get ahead of the impending chaos. By 9 a.m., I had called an emergency meeting with my management team and legal advisor. I've made a decision that will impact our company significantly, I announced to the stunned faces around the conference table. We will be terminating all contracts with the Wesley family effective immediately. The room erupted in concerned questions. The Wesleys are 30% of our revenue. We're in the middle of 3 projects for them. Is this even legally possible? My lawyer Tina raised her hand to quiet everyone. I've reviewed our contracts. There are termination clauses, but there will be penalties for breaking them mid-project. We're looking at substantial financial losses. I understand that, I responded, and I'm prepared to bear those costs personally if necessary. My project manager Daniel looked concerned. Sadie, what happened? Yesterday, everything was fine, and today you're willing to tank the company over this. I debated how much to share, then decided my team deserved the truth. I told them about the dinner, the wine incident, the demand for money, and Jake's betrayal. By the time I finished, the room had fallen silent. So, I concluded, this isn't just a business decision. It's about maintaining our dignity as a company. I won't work with people who don't respect us. To my surprise, Daniel was the first to support me. I've dealt with Mrs. Wesley on the Maui property renovation. She's a nightmare client who treats our staff like servants. I say good riddance. Others nodded in agreement, though concerns remained about the financial implications. We spent the rest of the morning strategizing how to minimize the damage and redistribute our resources to other projects. By lunchtime, my office phone rang. It was Jake. "You're not answering my calls or texts," he said when I reluctantly picked up. "I have nothing to say to you." "Sadie, you need to understand. This is how my family operates. My mother tests everyone this way. She did the same thing to my brother's wife, to my sister's husband. It's a twisted tradition, but it's just a test." "A test I have no interest in passing," I replied coldly. "Look, I know she went too far with the wine thing. That was unexpected even for me. But the financial requirement is just her way of ensuring you're marrying me for love, not money." I couldn't help but laugh at the absurdity. "By demanding money from me, how does that make any sense, Jake?" He sighed. "It's complicated. The family has been burned before by people who just wanted the Wesley fortune. This weeds out the gold diggers. I built my own company. I never asked you for a penny. How could anyone possibly think I was after your money? That's why I thought you'd pass her test with flying colours. I never expected you to walk out like that." His words made me realise something. "So you did know. You knew exactly what your mother was planning." A pause. "Not the wine part, but yes, I knew she would challenge you somehow. Everyone who marries into the family goes through this." The betrayal cut even deeper. "And you didn't think to warn me, to prepare me. You just threw me to the wolves and expected me to take the abuse with a smile. I thought you were stronger than this, Sadie. I thought you understood how the world works. Sometimes you have to bend to get what you want." "I don't bend, Jake. Not like that. Not for anyone. And the fact that you expected me to shows you never really knew me at all." I hung up my hands, shaking with anger. Within an hour, my email inbox exploded with messages from Wesley Corp's legal department, threatening lawsuits for breach of contract, demanding immediate reconsideration, and warning of severe consequences for my business. I forwarded everything to Tina, who promised to handle it. "They're bullying you," she said, "but they don't have as much legal ground as they think. We'll fight this." By the end of the day, word had spread through Seattle's tight-knit design community about my falling out with the Wesleys. Several clients called to discreetly inquire what had happened. 2 cancelled their contracts outright, clearly afraid of crossing the powerful family. When I returned home that evening, exhausted and worried, I found a large bouquet of flowers outside my door with a card from Jake. "I love you. Please don't throw us away over one bad night." I tossed both the flowers and the card into the trash. That night, I barely slept. Doubts crept in as I calculated the financial impact of my decision. I had 14 employees who depended on me for their livelihoods. What if I couldn't make payroll in a few months? What if the Wesleys made good on their threats to sue? What if I lost everything I'd worked for? For the first time since starting my business, I felt truly afraid. Not just for myself, but for everyone who had trusted in my vision and leadership. The next morning, my phone rang with an unknown number. Against my better judgment, I answered. "Is this Sadie?" a woman's voice asked. "Yes, who's this?" "My name is Beth Taylor. You don't know me, but I used to date Jake Wesley. I heard about what happened at the dinner with his parents. Can we meet for coffee?" Curiosity overcame my wariness. "How did you hear about the dinner?" "Seattle's a small town in certain circles," she replied, "and the Wesleys have a reputation. Please, I think it might help you to talk to someone who's been in your shoes." We arranged to meet at a small cafe far from my office or any Wesley properties. Beth turned out to be a stylish woman in her mid-30s with a warm smile and knowing eyes. "So," she said after we'd gotten our drinks, "you're the latest victim of the Wesley initiation." "You went through this too?" I asked. Beth nodded. 3 years ago, Jake and I dated for about 8 months before the infamous dinner. Margaret pulled the same stunt, though in my case she accidentally spilled an entire gravy boat on my dress instead of wine. And the demand for money. $100,000 for me, Beth said, stirring her coffee. Apparently inflation has hit the Wesley marriage tax. Despite everything, I found myself laughing. "What did you do?" "I left just like you. Couldn't stomach the humiliation or Jake's passivity. He called for weeks afterward with the same excuses I'm sure he's giving you now. It's just a test. It's family tradition. You need to understand how our world works." "Did you know about another woman who actually paid?" I asked, remembering Jake's comment about his family being burned before. Beth's expression darkened. "Amanda, she was before my time, but I heard stories. She came from new money, wanted the prestige of the Wesley name. She paid the fee, married Jake's brother Scott, and has been miserable ever since. Margaret treats her like property she purchased. That's horrible, I murmured. The Wesley family operates like a cult, Beth explained. Margaret is the supreme leader. The children were raised to obey her without question. Howard checked out decades ago after one too many of Margaret's power plays. Jake and his siblings can't see how toxic it all is because it's their normal. But Jake seems so different when we were together, I protested. Independent kind, nothing like what you're describing. Beth gave me a sad smile. They all seem different outside the family orbit. But put them back in Margaret's presence and they revert to trained poodles. Jake will never choose you over his mother. He doesn't know how. She reached across the table and squeezed my hand. You did the right thing walking away both personally and professionally. The Wesleys don't just want employees or spouses, they want subjects. After meeting with Beth, I did some research of my own. I discovered that every Wesley child had married someone who either came from comparable wealth and social standing or someone who had been tested and eventually submitted to Margaret's demands. None of the marriages seemed particularly happy, and 2 had ended in messy, hushed-up divorces. I also learned that the Wesley Corporation had a history of absorbing smaller businesses owned by family spouses, stripping them of autonomy, and eventually either rebranding them or shutting them down entirely. The pattern was clear. Margaret Wesley didn't want a daughter-in-law. She wanted another acquisition. Armed with this knowledge, I agreed to meet Jake one last time at a neutral location, a coffee shop downtown. He arrived looking haggard with dark circles under his eyes. Thank you for meeting me, he said, sliding into the chair across from me. I've been worried sick about you. I'm not the one you should be worried about, I replied. I want to understand something, Jake. Why didn't you warn me about what your mother would do? He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture I once found endearing. I told you it's tradition. Everyone goes through it. That's not an answer. You watched me plan for that dinner, get excited about finally meeting your parents officially. You knew what was coming and you said nothing. Why? Jake looked uncomfortable. I thought you'd handle it better than the others. You're strong, independent. I thought you'd see it for the stupid power play it is and just roll with it. Roll with having wine thrown in my face, being told I need to pay a dowry in reverse, having my business essentially held hostage. When you put it like that, it sounds bad, but it is bad, Jake. It's abusive, and the fact that you can't see that is deeply troubling. He leaned forward, desperation in his eyes. Look, I admit my mother went too far. I've told her as much. She's willing to apologize if you come back to the table. She respects that you stood up to her, believe it or not. I shook my head. I don't want her respect if that's how she shows it. And frankly, I don't want a relationship with a man who thinks this kind of behavior is acceptable. What are you saying? I'm saying that meeting your mother showed me who you really are, Jake. Not the man I fell in love with, but the man who was raised to think emotional manipulation and public humiliation are normal family dynamics. That's not fair, he protested. You can't judge me based on my family. I'm judging you based on your actions. You sat there and laughed while your mother threw wine in my face. You expected me to pay a fee to marry you. You're still defending her behavior instead of acknowledging how wrong it was. Jake's expression hardened. So that's it. You're throwing away our entire relationship over one dinner. No, I'm recognizing that our relationship wasn't what I thought it was. You weren't who I thought you were. As I stood to leave, Jake grabbed my wrist. My wrist. You're making a mistake, Sadie. My family can make things very difficult for you professionally. I gently removed his hand. That sounds like a threat, Jake. It's a reality check. My mother is already calling her friends about your business practices. How long do you think you'll last in this town without the right connections? In that moment, I saw clearly what Beth had meant about the real Jake Wesley. The mask of the kind, supportive partner had slipped completely, revealing the entitled, manipulative man beneath. Goodbye, Jake. I hope someday you find the courage to break free from your mother's control, but I won't be around to see it. As I walked away, I felt a strange mixture of sadness and relief. I had loved Jake, or at least the version of him he had shown me, but that person didn't exist, and no amount of money, prestige, or social standing was worth tying myself to a family that operated through fear and control. Now I just had to figure out how to save my business from their vengeance. The full impact of crossing the Wesley family hit my business like a tsunami. Within 2 weeks of the dinner incident, we lost not only all Wesley contracts, but 5 other major clients who had mysterious concerns about our reliability. 2 vendors suddenly couldn't fulfill our orders. A bank called in a small business loan for review. Each morning brought new challenges, and each night I went home wondering if I'd made the biggest mistake of my life. The stress began taking a physical toll, sleepless nights, weight loss, constant headaches. My office became a war room as we strategized daily to keep the company afloat. Tina, my lawyer, worked overtime fighting the legal threats from Wesley Corp, while my financial team scrambled to restructure our budget. I had to let go of 3 junior designers, one of the hardest decisions I'd ever made. "It's not your fault," Daniel told me after the tearful meeting where I'd announced the layoffs. "You stood up for yourself, and for all of us, really. No one blames you." But I blamed myself. I had built Elite Interiors to be a haven for creative professionals, a place where talent mattered more than connections or pedigrees. Now that vision was crumbling because I'd challenged one powerful family. One particularly difficult day, after learning that a major shelter magazine had suddenly cancelled a feature on one of our projects, I sat alone in my office, considering the unthinkable, selling the company and starting over somewhere else, maybe in Los Angeles or New York, far from the Wesleys' influence. A knock on my door interrupted these gloomy thoughts. My assistant poked her head in. "There's someone here to see you. He doesn't have an appointment, but he's rather insistent." "Who is it?" I asked, not in the mood for surprise visitors. "Howard Wesley." My heart sank. What new torment was the Wesley family bringing to my doorstep? "Send him in," I said, bracing myself. Howard entered, looking uncomfortable in the modest surroundings of my now downsized office. Gone was his usual confident demeanor, replaced by something that looked almost like shame. "Thank you for seeing me, Sadie," he said, declining my offer of a seat. "I'll be brief. I came to apologize." Of all the things I expected him to say, an apology wasn't on the list. Apologize for what exactly? The threats, the cancelled contracts, or the systematic attempt to destroy my business? He winced. All of it. None of it was my idea, but I didn't stop it either, which makes me equally culpable. "Why are you here, Howard?" "If Margaret sent you to offer some kind of deal." "Margaret doesn't know I'm here," he interrupted. "And if she found out, well, let's just say I'd be sleeping in the guest house for the foreseeable future." That got my attention. Howard Wesley going against his wife's wishes was unprecedented based on everything I'd learned about their family dynamic. He finally sat down, shoulders slumping. "I've been married to Margaret for 42 years. In the beginning, she wasn't like this. Ambitious, yes. Strong-willed, certainly, but not cruel. Something changed when the business took off when we moved in certain social circles. She became obsessed with status, with control. Why are you telling me this? Because I want you to understand that what happened at that dinner wasn't about you. It was about Margaret's insecurity, her fear of losing control of Jake, of the family image she's cultivated so carefully." I shook my head. Understanding her motives doesn't excuse her actions, or yours or Jake's. "You're right," he nodded. "Nothing excuses it. That's why I'm here. To tell you that I'm sorry for not standing up for you and to offer my help if you'll accept it." "Help?" I asked skeptically. "I can't undo the damage to your existing client relationships, but I have friends who operate outside of Margaret's influence, people who value quality work over social politics. I could introduce you discreetly, of course." I studied his face, looking for signs of deception. "Why would you do that? Why risk your wife's wrath to help me?" Howard's eyes grew distant. "Because 40 years ago, I made the same choice Jake did. I chose Margaret's approval over standing up for what was right. I've been living with the consequences ever since." He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a business card. "This is Tom Henderson. He's developing a boutique hotel downtown and needs an interior designer. If you call him, he'll give you a fair shot based solely on your portfolio. No strings attached." I took the card cautiously. "Does Jake know you're doing this?" "No, Jake is..." Howard hesitated. "Jake is still his mother's son. He believes he can have it both ways, please Margaret, and win you back." "That's not going to happen," I said firmly. "I know. That's why I'm here instead of him." Howard stood to leave. "For what it's worth, Sadie, I think you're the best thing that ever happened to my son, and he's a fool for not fighting for you." After Howard left, I sat staring at the business card for a long time. Could I trust this gesture, or was it another Wesley trap? Eventually, my practical side won out. I couldn't afford to ignore any potential lifeline for my business, even one extended by a Wesley. I called Tom Henderson, half expecting the number to be fake, but it was real, and so was Tom's interest in my work. He invited me to present design concepts for his hotel the following week. When I shared this development with my team, opinions were divided. Some saw it as an opportunity we desperately needed, while others feared it was some elaborate setup. What if you go to this meeting and Margaret Wesley is sitting there ready to humiliate you again? My office manager worried. It was a valid concern, but we were running out of options. Then I'll handle it with dignity, just like before, I replied. But we need this contract. We need to show everyone that Elite Interiors can't be bullied out of business. The presentation to Tom Henderson went better than I could have hoped. He was genuinely impressed with our concepts, and particularly liked our emphasis on showcasing local artists and craftspeople. By the end of the meeting, he offered us the contract on the spot. As promising as this development was, I knew one contract wouldn't save us. We needed a more sustainable solution. That night, lying awake in bed, I had an epiphany. The Wesleys and their social circle had been our primary client base, but they represented a tiny fraction of potential customers. What if instead of trying to replace our lost luxury clients with similar ones, we expanded our market? What if Elite Interiors began offering design services to the middle market people who wanted beautiful spaces but couldn't afford the astronomical fees charged by high-end designers? The next morning, I called an all-hands meeting. We're changing our business model, I announced to my surprise team. Instead of serving a small number of ultra-wealthy clients, we're going to create a tiered service approach that makes good design accessible to more people. I outlined my vision: keep our custom high-touch service for luxury clients, while adding a more streamlined option with pre-selected design packages at lower price points. We would leverage technology to serve more clients with fewer in-person meetings, creating a scalable model that could actually increase our revenue while reducing our dependence on any single client or social circle. This is a complete pivot, Daniel pointed out. It will require significant changes to our operations, marketing, everything. I know, I admitted, and I understand if not everyone wants to come on this journey with me, but I believe this is our path not just to survival, but to something better than what we had before. To my surprise and gratitude, the entire team committed to the new direction. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of activity as we developed new service packages, redesigned our website, and created a social media campaign targeting our expanded market. The Henderson Hotel project gave us a much-needed boost both financially and psychologically. When photos of our work there appeared in a design blog, other businesses began reaching out. Simultaneously, our new mid-tier services attracted clients who had previously assumed Elite Interiors was beyond their budget. Slowly, we began to rebuild. It wasn't easy, and there were many moments when I questioned my decisions. The Wesleys continued their whisper campaign against me in certain circles, but as our client base diversified, their influence mattered less and less. 3 months after the fateful dinner, I received another unexpected visitor, Jake. He appeared at my apartment unannounced, looking even more haggard than at our coffee shop meeting. "I need to talk to you," he said when I opened the door. "Please." Against my better judgment, I let him in. He paced my small living room, agitated. "I've been miserable without you," he began. "I've tried to make my mother understand what she's done, but she won't listen. She thinks time will change your mind." "It won't," I said simply. "I know that now." He stopped pacing and faced me. "I've been watching you rebuild your business completely, reimagining it despite everything my family did to stop you. You're extraordinary, Sadie." "Thank you, but flattery isn't going to change anything between us. I'm not trying to win you back," he said, surprising me. "I know that's not possible anymore. I'm here because I need to apologize properly, and because I want you to know that I'm finally standing up to my mother." "What does that mean exactly?" Jake sat down heavily on my sofa. "I've moved out of the family estate. I'm looking for my own place. I told my mother that her treatment of you was unacceptable and that I won't be part of her games anymore." "That's a start," I acknowledged, "but it doesn't change what happened." "I know. I'm not asking for forgiveness, Sadie. I'm just trying to do the right thing, even if it's too late." He stood to leave. "I'll make sure my mother backs off completely from interfering with your business. It's the least I can do." As he reached the door, he turned back. "You were the best thing that ever happened to me, and I threw it away because I was too cowardly to stand up for you. I'll regret that for the rest of my life. After he left, I sat in silence processing his words. I didn't feel the vindication I might have expected. Instead, I felt a quiet sadness for the man who had taken so long to find his backbone, and for the relationship that could have been if he'd found it sooner. But I also felt something else: closure. And with closure came the freedom to move forward without looking back. 1 year after the wine-throwing incident that changed my life, Elite Interiors was not only surviving, but thriving. Our new business model had proved more successful than I ever imagined. By making design services accessible to a broader market, we'd actually increased our revenue by 40%, and our staff had grown from 11 to 17. The Henderson Hotel project had won a regional design award, bringing positive attention and new clients. We'd opened a small retail space, selling affordable home accessories, curated by our designers, creating an additional revenue stream that helped offset the feast or famine cycle of project work. More importantly, I'd built a company culture based on respect and authenticity values that extended to how we treated both our clients and each other. We turned down projects from clients who treated our team poorly, no matter how lucrative the contract might be. This policy radical in an industry often defined by accommodating difficult personalities for the sake of prestige or profit attracted talented designers who had grown weary of toxic work environments. On the anniversary of that fateful dinner, I hosted a small celebration at our office, thanking my team for their loyalty and resilience. As we toasted our success with champagne, no red wine in sight, I reflected on how what had seemed like a disaster had ultimately forced me to create something better than what I had before. After the party, I headed to a charity auction supporting arts education in public schools. As I browsed the silent auction items, I felt someone watching me. Turning, I found myself face to face with Jake Wesley for the first time in months. He wasn't alone. A petite blonde woman stood beside him, her hand resting possessively on his arm. From her designer outfit and confident bearing, I could tell she was exactly the type of woman Margaret Wesley would approve of. "Sadie," Jake nodded, looking uncomfortable. "It's good to see you." "You too," I replied, surprised to find I actually meant it. Jake introduced his companion as Alexis Thornton, his fiancée. The diamond on her finger made the one he'd given me look modest by comparison. "Your design firm is doing amazingly well," Alexis commented. "I've read about your new approach in several business journals." "Thank you," I said. "It's been an interesting journey." An awkward silence fell. Alexis excused herself to bid on an item, leaving Jake and me alone. "Congratulations on your engagement," I said, filling the silence. Jake gave a rueful smile. "Thanks. Alexis is exactly who my mother wanted for me all along." "Are you happy?" I asked, genuinely curious. He shrugged. "I'm doing what's expected. It's easier that way." "That's not the same as happy, Jake." "No," he agreed quietly. "It's not. But not everyone has your courage, Sadie. Some of us just learn to live within the boundaries we're given." I felt a surge of pity for him. Despite his wealth and privilege, Jake was still imprisoned by his mother's expectations, still unable to break free. "My mother invited Alexis's family to dinner last month," he continued. "She was perfectly charming the entire time. No wine throwing, no outrageous demands. I'm honored to have been treated differently," I said dryly. "You should be," Jake replied, surprising me. "It means she saw you as a real threat to her control. With Alexis, she doesn't have to worry." Before I could respond, Alexis returned, and they soon made their excuses to leave. As they walked away, I noticed the slight stiffness in Jake's shoulders, the practiced smile that never reached his eyes. He had chosen the path of least resistance, and it had cost him his chance at authentic happiness. Later that evening, as I mingled with other guests, I was approached by a young woman who introduced herself as Emma, an event planner new to Seattle. "I hope this isn't too forward," she said nervously, "but I recently had a very strange experience with a client, and someone mentioned you might understand." "What kind of strange experience?" I asked. Emma described meeting with a wealthy mother who was planning her son's engagement party. During the meeting, the woman had suddenly become hostile, questioning Emma's background and suggesting that her kind was only interested in wealthy clients for their money. "She made me feel 2 inches tall," Emma confided. "I almost quit event planning altogether." I immediately recognized the pattern. "Let me guess. Was this woman's name Margaret Wesley?" Emma's eyes widened. "Yes." "How did you know?" I smiled. "Let's just say we've had similar experiences. I guided her to a quiet corner and shared a condensed version of my own story, watching her expression shift from shock to understanding. "So what did you do after that horrible dinner?" she asked when I finished. "I rebuilt my business on my own terms. I stopped chasing clients who didn't value respect as much as status. And I learned that sometimes walking away from what seems like an opportunity is actually walking towards something better." Emma absorbed this, nodding slowly. "I've been afraid to turn down any clients because I'm just starting out. But maybe quality is more important than quantity." "It absolutely is," I assured her. "Your reputation for integrity will attract the right clients in the long run." As we continued talking, I realized I was no longer angry when I thought about the Wesley incident. I had moved beyond it, transformed it into wisdom I could share with others. The pain had become purpose. Over the following months, I found myself informally mentoring Emma and several other young professionals navigating the complicated intersection of business and personal boundaries. I started a small workshop series called Worth It, helping women in particular recognize and maintain their value in professional relationships. My personal life had evolved as well. After taking time to heal from the Jake experience, I'd started dating Michael, a landscape architect I met through a mutual client. Unlike Jake, Michael came from a close-knit family with healthy boundaries and genuine warmth. The first time I met his parents, they hugged me and asked thoughtful questions about my interests, not my financial status or family background. Our relationship progressed naturally, without power struggles or hidden agendas. When he proposed after a year and a half of dating, it was with a simple sapphire ring that had belonged to his grandmother. No grand gestures, no family tests, just an honest question asked with an open heart. "I love your work ethic, your creativity, your resilience," he told me. "I love how you rebuilt your company against all odds. I love that you value integrity over convenience. Will you marry me, Sadie?" When I said yes, it was with complete confidence that I was choosing a partner who would stand beside me, not above or behind me. The day we announced our engagement, I received a small package at my office. Inside was a delicate glass paperweight with a note, "To new beginnings built on mutual respect. Wishing you all the happiness you deserve. Howard Wesley." I placed the paperweight on my desk as a reminder that sometimes the most painful experiences lead us exactly where we need to be. The incident with Margaret Wesley had cost me a relationship and temporarily threatened my business, but it had given me something far more valuable, the unshakable knowledge of my own worth. As I look back now, I realize that walking away from Jake and his family's money was the best business decision I ever made. Not just for my company, but for my soul. I built something authentic that reflected my values, not someone else's expectations. And in doing so, I found both professional success and personal peace that no amount of money could ever buy. Sometimes the most powerful word in business isn't yes or even more. Sometimes it's simply no. No to disrespect, no to manipulation, no to the belief that your worth can be measured by someone else's yardstick. Have you ever had to stand up for your dignity, even when it cost you something valuable? What did that experience teach you about yourself? Share your story in the comments below. And if this resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share with someone who might need to hear that they're worth more than what others try to make them believe. Thank you for listening to my journey, and remember, your self-respect is never too high a price to pay.